Hello, and welcome to Chapter Select at the Movies, the show where Randy and I'm Jens, we watch movies based on video games and then discuss what we liked and didn't like about them, whether they work as pieces of art, so to speak. Now, this week, we are covering Jan de Bond's classic follow up to Simon West's original Tomb Raider with Angelina Jolie, which I think we've done already, so giving us a nice basis for this review.
Yeah, did the first one.
Mm-hmm. And if I recall correctly, we thought that movie was a bit of a mess. I thought it was incoherent, felt unfinished, felt like there were bits missing.
I remember us talking about it. I think back when it first came out, I remembered it as being okay, and then we rewatched it for this, and I was like, it's fine, but not, as you said, things are missing. And then neither of us had watched the sequel before until this, so it'll be very interesting to see how both of us like this one. By the way, this is our 25th movie on this show.
Wow, 25. Nice.
So what did you think? Just quick overall thoughts of the movie before we start breaking it down more.
Well, I feel like they've addressed a lot of my complaints about the first movie. That's something I have to give it. Got to give it credit. With the first movie, I complained about how Angelina Jolie's version of Lara Croft was a huge idiot. How she was leading, basically without her, there would be no expedition, and she could easily thwart the bad guy's plan. And the only reason she's even risking humanity is for the selfish reason of wanting to see her dad one more time. She's going to risk all of existence. So I thought she was a hugely irresponsible character in the first movie and kind of an asshole. And in this movie, they've made her more likable. Of course, we're still spending time with her two best buds. Who I don't remember the actors, but it's the guy who plays Arnold Rimmer and the guy who plays Adolf Hitler in Max. So it's fun to see Arnold Rimmer and Adolf Hitler hanging out a lot in this movie together. I like all their scenes. Good interplay. So they return, which is nice. Her butler and her tech guy, her IT guy, and or hacker friend, whatever you want to call him. He will always be Hitler to me. But the point is, they have pretty good continuity with the last movie. Like the last movie, we start with her training and then being pulled into an adventure. And the best thing I can say about it's a very simple movie. I don't think we'll need to spend a lot of time describing the ins and outs of the plot.
One way to say it, sure.
In the fact that it follows, I think, the basic plot outline of 3 out of 5 Indiana Jones movies. So you know exactly what to expect. You're going to get those beats. You're going to get, it's the Germany 1944, and Lara Croft has to get the orb back from the Nazi train or whatever happens.
Mm-hmm.
But, that's not what happens, obviously. It's actually, and I thought this was interesting because you had messaged me. I should say, Randy saw this movie like weeks ago, and I just saw this movie tonight. So you're relying on my immediate memory and Randy's long-term memory.
Luckily, I took some notes. Not a lot of notes, but I took some notes. So.
But the thing that I was remembering is that a couple of weeks ago, you did text me that you thought the opening to this movie was so outlandish and so crazy, and you hope that it, tamps down after that. And watching it, to me, it was incredibly reminiscent of the beginning of the second reboot game, where, Lara's on an expedition, and, just as she gets the artifact, she gets ambushed by a bunch of dudes. So it didn't seem that outlandish to me, and the shark stuff also seemed in character. I actually thought that the movie was pretty strong in its first act.
Oh, God.
I thought the first
There's
act
going to be an interesting conversation.
promising.
I hated this opening act so much.
Okay,
the whole
let's
shark
just get
scene.
into it.
The whole shark scene is just ridiculous. I'm going to cut my hand. The shark's going to just swim by me. Forget I'm holding on to his fin. Swim me all the way back up to the surface, and then forget I'm bleeding and just leave me.
You would not think that was a cool game mechanic if you summoned the shark in the Tomb Raider game with your own blood?
No.
Okay. Well.
Wasn't there a Tomb Raider game before Tomb Raider had a reboot where you were underwater and dealing with the shark?
Of course.
And it was horrendously reviewed.
Was that the Angel of Darkness or whatever?
I don't know. There's a big gap in Tomb Raider that I just did not play. And
I actually never finished the first one.
I will tell you this right now, because yes, I did message Jens saying that I hoped that it would get better from the opening scene. It did not.
Oh man, I think
so hold on. So I want to address a couple things before we get into the ins and outs of this movie. Because you brought up your overall thoughts, and I think none of it was true.
What?
Laura, while she's not an asshole, she's not much of a character anymore.
That's not entirely true because she has an arc. Her arc, she has to learn the lesson that it's better to let some secrets lie, and it's better for some things to be unfound, and that she probably shouldn't open Pandora's box. That's the thing. What I was trying to get at is I felt in the last movie she was a completely irresponsible asshole, right? In this movie, she starts off better. In fact, she's not leading on or working with the bad guys for most of the movie, but rather she is kind of tracking behind them to try and get this important artifact back. Because, of course, as in all of these kind of stories, again, this exact story structure, you always have the small MacGuffin artifact that leads to the big MacGuffin artifact at the end of the movie that you have to find with it. Again, Indiana Jones. And they do a lot of stuff that they do. Like there's like Last Crusade stuff in here. There's Raiders stuff in here. There's James Bond stuff in here. So the influences are pretty clear what this movie is trying to be.
Yes.
You know, it's trying to be that kind of
and it's not even close movie. To any of them. This also came out.
But she does learn the lesson to not open Pandora's box. I mean, that's the absolute minimum. Like, to not just be the biggest dumbass.
And it took 2 hours of a horrendous movie for us to get to that character redemption moment. This came out, I looked it up while you were talking. This came out 3 years after Mission Impossible 2, which really started to
also a horrible movie.
Which pushed that series to the over-the-topness that it would then go down. And went, you know what? We're going to do the exact same thing. So, like, all of the little bit of charm that was in the first Tomb Raider movie is completely stripped away for set pieces and Angelina Jolie to have lover's quarrel with Gerard Butler, and that relationship was just mind-numbing to me.
It's the worst part of the movie, and especially because it is just a complete retread of the Daniel Craig relationship in the first movie.
That's exactly what I put in my notes. I go, they had to have a love interest in this movie, and they killed off the boyfriend from the first one, so they needed to bring back an old flame that was a little bit more
the entire time
rough.
That he's going to betray her at the end for the artifact.
Yeah, and it's just set piece after set piece after set piece. This is what the Fast and the Furious movies would become, but at least Fast and the Furious had great CGI to cover up their messes.
Here's the thing about it. I want to note a few positives, though. Firstly, Jan de Bont, right? He is one of the great effects guys, one of the great cinematographers, and a pretty good director in his own right. I mean, he made Speed, for crying out loud. He also made Speed 2. But
the yin and the yang.
Exactly. Two sides of the same coin. We're not so different, you and I. But he has a good visual sense. And apart from what is one sequence that's probably the worst day for night I've seen in a modern movie, where he literally just tinted a day shot blue in the most I don't know what I would have thought digital color grading would have been slightly further. This is post Oh Brother Art though, isn't it? Or is it pre? Regardless, I would have expected a better job on that. But other than that, I actually think it's a pretty good looking movie. It's sometimes a little drab, but then when it doesn't bring color back into it, it actually looks really good. Like, you know, at the Pandora's box scene at the end, I thought all that stuff looked really good. I thought the caves that they go through on their way to Pandora's box were very reminiscent of some kind of Souls designs. It felt very Souls-like.
Including creatures that don't fully really fade into trees or whatever that mess was.
Yeah, all that stuff was just like, oh man, this doesn't feel like Tomb Raider, but it does feel like Dark Souls.
Obviously, this is before its time, but this felt like Uncharted.
Yeah. There's definitely some of that
okay,
as
we're just
well.
going to have random ass creatures at the end of the game because supernatural.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I didn't really have an issue with that stuff. I generally think this movie is... I mean, there's supernatural elements to all the Tomb Raiders, except for, I think, the next one that we're going to watch where they strip that stuff out. But in the game, there were, supernatural monsters at the end.
I
That
get it.
happens
I get it.
a lot
I'm
in
just
those
saying
games.
they looked bad. I'm not saying it was dumb
They
for
look
them to
bad in the
put it in
first
there.
movie. I don't really have an issue with this in terms of effects or whatever, other than, well, yeah. Okay,
No.
again, we're going back to Last Crusade, right? You get the same. I've really jumped ahead on this because we're already talking about the ending. Because I'm too excited to talk about it, I guess. But the Crusade,
be a fun conversation.
The parallels are strong because you have we're dangling down the abyss, and you have to choose between saving the one person and getting the thing. You have the
yeah. Basically, this whole movie is we're going to take other things and then not do it as well, and then we're going to throw in a motorcycle drive across the Great Wall of China because we are going to have them pole vault off I forget what the pole vault thing is. All I have in my notes is fucking pole vault. God, I hate this movie. That's my note.
Well, what I was just trying to remember was that the face melting in Last Crusade kind of reminds me of what they're doing here with probably the worst effect in the movie where they melt the bad guy in the acid pool.
Oh, yeah.
Which, like, there are so many things where you're just like, oh yeah, you're taking the same, and it really is the same structure, the same kind of story beat, and it also reminded me a lot. I just watched Dial of Destiny, the last Indiana Jones movie, and it did the same thing where we start by stealing an artifact, and then we get captured, and then we free ourselves again, and then we steal the artifact back, and then we on the run for a while, and there's a bunch of chase scenes, and then we get captured again, and then they take the artifact, and then we
can we
break out again, and then we steal the artifact back.
Right. It's just, can we talk about that artifact for one moment?
Yes, the artifact is a big glowy orb, which turns out to be a map. It's like a giant. It looks like something that you'd buy in like a Spencer's Gifts. This just yellow orange crystal orb with black spots all over it. But of course, what those turn out to be is coordinates. So it's a big magical artifact. And they do the Raiders thing. They do the map room scene in Raiders with the orb, where when she gets into just the right place, that it gets illuminated, and there's a huge kind of hologram vision that emanates from it.
Can we talk about that hologram vision for a moment?
Yeah, we can.
What the fuck? So I get it that this is supposed to show you where it is. In Indiana Jones, it works because the thing just points at where you need to go in the map.
She had big visions at the end of the last movie.
But no, it's not her visions. It's the orb's visions. So this orb, which was created centuries ago, has panoramic 360-degree HD video that does not show you where it is, but just shows you highlights of how cool Africa is.
That's true. It is a fun kind of travelogue sequence.
It's just a travelogue. Here's elephants. Here's a tree. Here's straw.
Speaking of that kind of thing, this is something I wanted to talk about as well, which is that the attempts of this movie to make Lara Croft seem cool are all weirdly pathetic. It's all, as you say, it's like, oh, it's just a travelogue. Or, like when they go wing diving or whatever, sure, it's like, it's cool that they wing dive, but it's not that cool. We don't need to, give it all these glory shots and dedicate a 3-minute sequence to it.
They stood on that squirrel suit shot for so long.
But it's so cool, dude. It's so cool.
It was brutal. However, just that orb was basically like, here's some like a YouTube montage that a 12-year-old made of Africa for their student project. And she goes, we got to go to Zimbabwe. Huh?
What I do like about it is that she does it in front of this family where she basically borrows her TV and repurposes it as a display for her like live feed. But
at least the boyfriend makes it seem like, at least the boyfriend goes to that exact same apartment building to figure out where she went.
Yeah. But I just like that sequence because it just makes it seem like, she's so cool for the way that she assembles or jury rigs that whole thing.
Right.
just so she can, do what we've
And
all been
she's
doing.
always been into that stuff too. And again, I'm
she's. I mean, sure. I'm just saying, like, it's like presented as this like crowning badass moment. You know what I mean?
So yeah. So you have nailed the plot of this movie perfectly. Find orb, lose orb, get orb, lose orb.
Well, we haven't
get
yet
orb.
talked about the villain. We need to talk about the bad guy
because
it's firstly it's Syrian Hines. The poor man's Alan Rickman. And
poor. I could not have cared any less than I did for this villain and his little sidekick dude, which I've seen him in movies before, and I'm blanking on who it was.
Till Schweiger.
Oh yeah. By the
German
way,
guy. We'll get to see a lot more of him in Far Cry.
Spoilers for a couple movies from now.
Yeah.
But
Till Schweiger completely wasted as basically just a chief henchman, I suppose. May
have been the worst
guy's a movie star
villain we've had in any of our movies yet.
Okay, so let's talk about who this guy is. This is, again, the equivalent of like your typical mad Nazi scientist in Indiana Jones movie who wants to do things for Nazi reasons. In this case, he's still a mad scientist, and he's like some kind of a weird death merchant where he manufactures super diseases in a Wu-Tang lab somewhere, and then sells it to weird criminals who need super diseases all around the world. I guess dictators and stuff. I don't see this level of crazy germ warfare really happening, so I don't know where that came from. But then, of course, he has now learned of the existence of Pandora's box, which is where all the anti-energy in the world is stored, because, everything has to be perfectly balanced, as all things should be.
Mm-hmm.
So, for everything that lives, there has to be an anti-force, and this anti-force is contained in a box. And Gerard Butler wants to steal the box and sell it for money. And this guy, whatever, he wants to basically make a new super disease that he can do whatever with. I don't know what he's going to do with it. Is he going to ransom the world? Is he going to sell it for profit? Is he going to, Death Note?
He's going to pinky in the brain this damn thing and just take over the world. He's going to hold up the box and say, if you do not give me everything I want, I open the box. That's
okay. Yeah,
I don't know.
So he's just gonna demand. I want $1 billion in exchange for me not to open the Pandora's box.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, I actually think that he's just the guy who really loves killing, or he probably wants to genocide, certain groups, and like he wants to be able to target. Like, I want to target just this genetic subtype or whatever. I know that's very racist, but it feels that way in terms of, again, he's basically a Nazi, but under any other name.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just
now it's like in the name of commerce, but it doesn't really make sense because I do get that there's probably profit in this sort of thing, but not to the extent that his plans would require.
No, and he's just very boring. He's bland, and there's really no character to him other than I'm smart and I want to kill. And
I want to let loose. I want to let loose the worst disease on the world. Which newsflash, we all know how that ends. But I just don't get. He's a poor man's Bond villain. I mean, there's Bond villains that do kind of the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually what I'm thinking about quite a bit. Is stuff like The Spy Who Loved Me or whatever.
It's rough. Yeah, I mean, it's just, to me, this stripped down all of the clever things from the first movie, which was riddled with plot holes and issues in its own sense, but at least it had some charm, and just went set piece. We need a really cool fight. So now all of a sudden this guy is going to show Laura his cool ancient warrior statue collection. So then we can fight around those, which, by the way, half of those look like paper mache.
Yeah.
When they broke through them. And it's like, there were some good special effects. There were not in that scene at all, but it was only used there. And the moment they walked in, they're like, oh, we're fighting here. Mm-hmm. Instantly. It's only there to try to come up with cool set pieces. The same thing with the fight with the helicopter in the city street. And where were they? Mm-hmm. Was it Hong Kong, or where were they at?
God, I couldn't keep
city.
track of it.
They
At some
moved
point,
around a
they're
lot.
in Honduras and in Africa and wherever the
They
heck they are.
were somewhere
Do you even
in
remember
Eastern Asia,
where the Cradle of Life, where they eventually find the Pandora's box? Do you remember where
it was
that
like
is?
Madagascar or something, right? Or
Madagascar.
Zimbabwe.
Okay.
It was Zimbabwe or something. It was Madagascar is
Wow.
a different movie.
Goes to show how much of an impression.
It was
Thankfully,
in
not. Well,
Africa. It was
there was a
again.
video game based on Madagascar, but I don't think.
There's a
Anyway.
video game based on the movie Madagascar, but I don't think then they made a movie based on that video game, so we can't cover it. But
no, unfortunately, no, I can't get away with that. I would have rather watched Madagascar, honestly, than
compared to this and the movie we're going to talk about next week.
Oh my God. Probably. Who can say?
Anyways, what I love about this review and me just hijacking your format of the show is I've been able to avoid just the bit by bit of it because none of it made sense and all of it was garbage, and we both got to rant a little bit, and I actually like this version of our show more.
Well, I'm glad that you're enjoying yourself. Here's the thing that both of these movies have proven to me, which is that this version of Lara Croft, at least, is really just reckless It's just a reckless version of Indiana Jones, and just with no regard for anything, and stumbles her way through these idiotic plots, causes an insane amount of damage in the process.
Yep.
It does feel like it's, again, trying to be like a Bruckheimer type thing, even though it's not. It's Jan de Bont who really precedes a lot of the famous Bruckheimer stuff, and was a important director much earlier in that, or at least cinematographer much earlier in that, and has had a very long career. But nonetheless, he's working that style, and I felt the same way about Alan Silvestri, who does the music, because you may remember that I was very unhappy with Kramer Vell's score for the last one, because it was a thrown together at the last minute, here's some loops score that he had to do in a few days. I mean, literally a few days. Yeah. I'm not exaggerating. And I did not like the result of that. This, you've got Alan Silvestri, who's a venerable composer, Back to the Future, Judge Dredd, Mouse Hunt. He's done a million billion things. And here he's kind of forcing himself to work in a more modern kind of. This is like a transitionary score where it sounds like he's trying to be Hans Zimmer or something before he really finds the modern Alan Silvestri style that we later hear in the Avengers movies.
Honestly, to be fair, to this whole process, games like Tomb Raider and then later on Uncharted were based around making a video game out of the Indiana Jones genre and turning that into a video game, which we're still waiting for this Indiana Jones game to finally come out. But that's neither here nor there. However, so it works great in video game formats because it's like, cool, I get to play as this character and we're doing these Indiana Jones stick stuff. But then to take that and then make it a movie, you can't help but just steal Indiana Jones stuff. And then that's what we have in this one. We'll get to the Uncharted movie, I'm sure, at some point. They do that as well and add buddy cop stuff. But in the end, it just is like, well, this is just a very, very poor man's Indiana Jones, and it just doesn't work.
And that is really the difference. Even with the one that just came out, which I would, people at least agree is maybe not bad, but one of the lesser ones, still better than the last one. Regardless, it's a great spectacle that. And it has stuff in it that's there's stuff in it that's fantastic, and there's stuff in it that's pretty good, and overall it's a pretty decent movie. And you can have a movie that's maybe not amazing all the way through, that has some weaknesses, but if there's enough big highlights, and that's a movie that at least gives you spectacle, and production value. This movie gives you some of that. I think, again, a part of those day for night scenes that Jan de Bont knows how to make a movie look good, and it looks pretty competent. The special effects obviously have not aged well; they're pretty horrible in parts.
Like I said, to me, all that stuff made me remember Mission Impossible 2 and all the John Woo stuff. One note that I did put in here that I haven't brought up yet is there was so much slow mo in this movie, and then again, that was the sign of the time. Like the Max Payne game was around this time, and a lot of the movies were doing the slow mo stuff, and. So there you go. Do you have a score for this thing?
like to me, it's not. There's nothing inherently like this. The derivativeness is the worst thing, and the fact that, as I said, I actually think Lara's better in this movie because the Lara from the last Tomb Raider would have absolutely just opened Pandora's box at the end and doomed us all.
Well, maybe she would have if she was promised to see her dad again.
Yeah, but she had that moment, and I also quite liked how she disposed of Gerard Butler because it's so unassuming. You know, it's not like a big fight like in the last movie. It's more. Well, I don't want to spoil for anyone who hasn't seen Game of Thrones, but you know.
Yeah, I know the scene you're talking about.
Yeah, it feels more like a mercy killing. You know, like he never had a chance. And she was just trying to keep him alive, and then in the end she couldn't. But she had to do what she had to do.
And then you wonder
she put him down. She put him down like an animal.
And then you wonder.
And I like that,
but I also liked it. Was you wonder who got who, kind of a thing, because the blow was because off camera.
You hear a shot, and then you don't know where the shot. You know, where is blood going to start dribbling out of her mouth or his mouth?
Right.
So it gives you that moment. My favorite variant of that is when there's a second person who actually fired the shot that you then cut to or go into focus on.
Right.
It's a good trope.
All right, give me a score,
but
sir.
This movie, the problem with this movie is comprised entirely of tropes.
Yep.
Like it doesn't. Like it looks pretty good. The action isn't bad. Yes, there is some paper mache, as you say. There's some stuff that is not that believable, but mostly it's pretty well put together action. And I don't hate the fight scenes. I don't hate the editing. It's all workmanlike. It's all relatively competent, okay, in terms of how it's made. I also think, again, even though the Alan Silvestri score is not to my taste, I can see that he's experimenting with a style that he doesn't usually write in, which is the anthemic Hans Zimmer style a bit. So that's kind of interesting in that way. It's got a lot of people in it that I like. It's got some moments in it that made me smile, maybe. You know, again, stuff involving Arnold Rimmer. But in the end, it's just such a complete nothing of a movie.
Yes.
Like, there's just not, like, it's not, there's not an original element or a memorable element to it. So I would say it's a cotton candy. It's complete fluff, you know, it just disappears in your mouth immediately and then leaves maybe a bit of a chemical aftertaste. So I would say average. I give it a 5 out of 10.
So I will let you know then that you are rating this higher than the first one then?
Correct, because I thought the first one was a fucking mess.
That is fair. We both gave the original Lara Croft Tomb Raider a 4.5. And I'm with you where it is a complete fluff and it's completely forgettable. But I like this less than I liked the first one, and that's how I scored it. So I gave it a 4. So
interesting.
Not too much lower, but still lower.
Any more peeves? Anything else that stuck out to you as particularly frustrating?
Hold on, let me go through my notes and how many times did I say I hate this movie? Hold on. Wow. The opening scene was whatever to me. It was, why did we have a wedding? Just to see an earthquake, and then we're underneath the water for any of that. That made whatever. Pole vaulting was goddamn the worst thing I've ever seen. I still can't even remember where the pole vault was. It broke me. One thing I also did not like was during the fight around the statues, the boyfriend is getting his ass kicked. Laura yells something and he goes, "All right, I'm done." It's like, it wasn't even like a, "Hey, all right, let's go." It was just, she yelled and he went, "Okay, now."
Yeah, no, she's got the safe word. She calls the shots. She says when they fight and when they don't fight.
Word. It's like, all right, now you can move on. No, I think I've hit
absolutely
most of it.
No. They're there for her. So when she says training stops, training stops.
Right. It's a movie. That's for sure.
No, that's just I actually think, like, this is, to me, it's basically completely inoffensive, except in how much it wastes my time. Like, as just another Lara Croft adventure, it is perfectly fine if you want just another Lara Croft adventure. And I think you will agree with me that if this was the story and the cutscenes that held together a pretty action-heavy Lara Croft video game, you wouldn't complain. you'd say this is a pretty average Lara Croft video game story, and at least I get to shoot people in between this stuff.
At least I actually got to play the video game part.
Yeah,
this didn't have any of the video game part, just the bad cutscenes.
Yeah, so I don't think it's a bad Lara Croft story in that regard. I think it's a better Lara Croft story than the last one.
To be fair, actually now makes sense for your rating, because you also gave Ratchet and Clank a 5, and that was just the cutscenes without the video game part.
Exactly, same complaint.
There you go. So, all right, so I gave it a 4, you gave it a 5, gives it an average score of 9, which comes to be a very common combined score for us through 25 movies. I just want to hit on these because it's always fun for me to look at it. So it is the exact same combined score that we gave the first Tomb Raider movie. It is also the same combined score that we gave the first Resident Evil movie. Assassin's Creed, which we just did a week or two ago. Like a Dragon, which, God, I forget all about that movie. And
Like a Dragon had bigger highlights, but also made me angrier in some ways.
And also,
it just squandered so much opportunity.
And also, Wing Commander, we combined.
Wing Commander also. I felt like there was potential there for a halfway decent B sci-fi movie.
Yeah, so there you go. It is in a tie for 13th right now, in a 6-way tie.
Out of the 25. These movies are really mediocre.
Again, 16.5 is our best movie of all time so far.
Yeah.
So that's just over an average of an 8. It's brutal. And we've already watched the movie that we will be presenting to you next week. But go ahead, Jens. It was your pick. So go ahead and announce it.
I'm very, very sorry. I would urge the listeners not to watch along. The movie is Angry Birds.
Yeah. We'll get to it.
Yep.
We'll get to it. It was something.
And it's on Netflix, so if you do already have Netflix, it is free. If you want to,
it's an hour and a half.
It's an hour and 40 almost. It's an hour and 38.
Is it that long? I
forget. I guess with credits, but there, it's one of those anime movies where they stick a bunch of stuff in the credits. So
that's true.
You're going to be watching them.
All right, there you go. 25 movies down, a lot more to get to. Will anything ever top Ace Attorney? That is the question. Spoilers, next week's episode will not top Ace Attorney.
That'll be a tall order.
Yeah, but we'll see how it goes. But
until then,
that's next week. You guys have a good one.